Donald Trump's panic around the Epstein files couldn't possibly be clearer. He is doing anything he can to cover up and distract, and ultimately it is backfiring on him. And that is exactly what we just saw in an insane post that Donald Trump recently made that's giving away the game of how scared he is of these Epstein files and the controversy around it. And it came after Jon Stewart made a very important point, dropping a bombshell on Donald Trump that brings to light all of his panic. We're going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, before we can get into what Jon Stewart had to say in the post that raises so many questions around Trump, I want to start with how Gavin Newsom perfectly called out Trump's panic and why we need to stay focused on the Epstein files.
There were certain promises made about the Epstein files and it would be released, and if you vote for me, then I will release these files. And now there's nothing to see.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Well, they lied. They lied to you then, or they're lying to you now, period. Someone lied about this. They dangled this in order to get votes. And they lied to people. They used people. And someone needs to be held to account. And look, I could be cynical about it. I could be very political about it and say it's interesting when we brought up Elon, when Elon Musk tweets something out saying Trump's on the list, and a few days later, there is no list. You can be cynical about that. It leads to some open-ended questions.
What would you have done if you were Trump in that situation? So say that you'd been elected and the public are demanding to see this list. What would you have done?
Well, one thing is obvious. I know Pam Bondi well, the Attorney General. We've known each other over the years. She doesn't move without Trump. If she's fired, she's the fall person because there's no question she was directed by Trump to say what she said. She would not have, period, full stop, done something independent of the president on the Epstein files.
So Trump is the person that's...
So one has to acknowledge that. So then it begs additional questions. Why was she told not to release the files unless, A, there's no files, and they made it up the entire damn time, just like they made up Obama's birth certificate, just like they make up most things, most days, my humble position. I think that's very plausible. It could be very simple. It could be as simple as that.
They started the conspiracy
and now they're covering their ass and they're just like, shit, we got caught. We use this, we sort of squeezed this out. We got everything we needed. We're in power. Or it's more insidious than that. And look, the one thing is just not even, it's just simple truth. Epstein and Trump were close. They were. It wasn't just a few photographs. They were close. That's a fact. Sorry, Donald. Just a fact. So, look, I get why this outrages folks. I think it's interesting. It's outraged some of the core base. I enjoy the hell out of it. That was my private voice out loud as a Democrat. And and I hope our party gins this up much more, as they would.
If you get into office, people are going to say, release the list.
I mean, if there's
They're going to say,
commit to release the list or what?
Yeah.
Unless there's some national security secret here or something. And I know that leads to speculation about Mossad and other speculation about, was he on the foreign intelligence list? And is there real implications to our national security? Why did he make all his money? I mean, I've got enough problems with homelessness and housing in California to worry about Jeffrey Epstein. But hey, they created this mess. Now they got to clean it up.
I have always viewed this as a clear class issue. You do not have to do any political gymnastics to get to the conclusion that Donald Trump is covering for himself, but also by ending this investigation, covering other rich, well-off, and well-connected people. That is what Donald Trump is doing. If you have lots of money, you can abuse the system. If you don't, the system will screw you. That is what we can see happening right now, and it's what we could see from the beginning, which is funny, why the guy who pointed it out is someone who has abused the system. It's Elon Musk, who Jon Stewart made a point about right here that is a bombshell for Trump. Jon Stewart knows why Trump isn't suing Elon for Epstein dig. Jon Stewart has a theory about why the very litigious president has not sued his former buddy Elon Musk for declaring to the world that he's in the Epstein files. They have a little bit of a China-US-like mutually assured destruction. I think they know enough about each other, Stewart surmised on the weekly show Thursday. Other than that, he said, I cannot for the life of me think why Trump wouldn't sue Elon Elon for saying Trump is in the Epstein files. But then, Stewart added, Trump is so clearly all over the Epstein files. It feels like every day now there's something new with Trump and Epstein, Stewart said. There was another Epstein Dropbox like your iPhone bringing up memories of us, Stewart quipped. It's Epstein and Trump at a wedding. Now there's all these photos. It's them dancing. There's video of them getting matching tattoos, eating spaghetti like Lady and the Tramp, he joked more. They very clearly dug each other in a deep Starsky and Hutch kind of way. Sure enough, on Thursday morning, more than a month after Musk's Epstein tweet, Trump poured a little sugar on his relationship with the Tesla CEO, writing to Truth Social, everyone is stating that I will destroy Elon's companies by taking away some, if not all, of the large-scale subsidies he receives from the U.S. government. That is not so. He wrote, I want Elon and all businesses within our country to thrive. In fact, thrive like never before. Stewart noted that one possible reason for Trump's Musk defense of government contracts, which the president has threatened to cancel before, is he may have few options otherwise. So I think it's pretty clear that Donald Trump made that post because he knows right now in this moment, the last thing he needs is more attacks from Elon. And Elon, who clearly at this point it seems like had access to the Epstein files enough to know that Trump was in them or has heard from people who have seen them. We know Pam Bondi in a meeting in May told Donald Trump that he was in the Epstein files. And if that leak reached the Wall Street Journal, it certainly reached Elon Musk before. So Trump is just scared, and we need to continue to pounce on that. And that is exactly what I talked with Congresswoman Katherine Clark, our Democratic whip, in the House about in an interview I hope you stick around all the way through. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me on today of all days when there is so much happening in the House with your colleagues who previously, in my mind, they seemed like they cared about making these files public, talking about this scandal around Jeffrey Epstein. That's no longer the case. Now, of course, it is because they are always willing to be cultists to Donald Trump. But do you think that there might be another level here where Republicans are looking to protect maybe their own interests with their associates, their donors? I don't know who else could be connected here, but do you think that's a possibility why they're stalling any release of these documents?
I mean, they're hiding something, right? We know this. So what it is, who it is, why this 180 that Donald Trump has done and Pam Bondi, we don't know, but there's one easy fix to it. It's release what you have. If there's no actual list, okay, release what you have. You promise you'd be transparent about it. Now you're trying to blame it on Democrats because that's the only playbook Donald Trump has. And so it's time. Release the files. Be honest with people. Whoever's names are in there are in there. But let's move on from this. And the way to do that is to fulfill your campaign promise of being transparent around it.
No, I completely agree. And the media framing, which is never what it should be, around the Democratic response in the House, I've found very strange. I saw Congressman Eric Swalwell ask the question of, well, do you think Democrats will fall into the trap of over-promising and under-delivering on these files? But I say to that, we want to make them public. We'll work to make them public. If we can, we will. That's not an over-promising. But in this moment where Republicans are trying to block anything Democrats do, what are the steps that can be taken in the House right now, even as Mike Johnson is squeamish on letting any of this go public?
Yeah, well, we have very limited tools, but we're going to use every single one of them. And you saw it yesterday in the House. We used a procedural move and said, release the Epstein files. And it really caught them off guard. And they originally voted in agreement with us. And then they came in leadership and got them to go back. But they know they're in a trap because they campaigned on this, that this would be some huge revelation about how corrupt Democrats are. And listen, we've always said, first, let's center what Epstein did around the victims. They're like the GOP completely forgets about them in their desire to make this, a political topic. So let's remember there are real women here who were very, very affected by this. And it's had a terrible effect on their lives for years to come. So let's talk about that and release what you have. that was a promise you made. And Democrats have never overpromised. We don't know what's in there. Maybe Donald Trump is in there. Maybe he's not. But let's move forward. And let's not forget that none of this should be a surprise to the Republican Party. Donald Trump put the prosecutor in his cabinet who gave Jeffrey Epstein a complete sweetheart deal, looking at a 50-page indictment that involved over 30 minor children, and he gave him work release 6 days a week, gets picked up by a driver and taken away. That's what Acosta did. That is who Donald Trump put in charge of his labor department, where he went on to cut 80% from the human trafficking enforcement division in that secretariat. So none of this should be a surprise, but this is wholly created by Donald Trump, and he just has to own it.
I'm so glad you bring that up, because how this somehow became a conspiracy of the right has always baffled me. I've also just been so disgusted by the idea that it is a conspiracy. Like, Jeffrey Epstein was a real person. He was a vile, evil criminal. This is not something that MAGA made up. What was made up is what they said are in these documents that Donald Trump won't release. And he's always talking about, well, the context might hurt people, or there's phony stuff. But the only way to figure that out is to actually release them. All we know at this point, or can assume, is that Trump is protecting, of course, himself and those around him. I view this just as much of a class issue as it is some conspiracy, because it's, once again, billionaires protecting their billionaire buddies, their rich friends, and using the system. How do we use that framing of this betrayal to speak to the other elements of the Trump administration that maybe aren't being discussed enough right now, because this is dominating the news cycle?
Yeah, I mean, there is a thread that goes through everything they're doing, and that is, you circle the wagons to protect the elites. And that's full stop. Every single thing they do. Hardworking people in this country, young people who are looking out and saying, how am I ever going to get out from under student debt? How am I ever going to be able to afford rent or a house? How am I going to get to that first rung of the American dream? And everything they feel is stacked against them, and they're not wrong. But what this administration with the House GOP is doing is doubling down on that, saying, not let's look at our taxes and find a way they can be more fair and actually help people accumulate wealth and success, and do that in a fair way by having people pay their fair share and enforcing the existing tax rules we have and making them better where we can. They've just done the complete opposite and said we're going to even rig them more towards the very, very wealthy at the expense of your health care. And when you take $1 trillion out of Medicare, $500 billion out of $1 trillion out of Medicaid, and $500 billion out of Medicare, like, that is going to increase everybody's health care. Never mind just devastate people who rely on those programs. And all just to give that tax break. And the kicker is, then we're saying to future generations, and you're going to figure out how you pay off this debt, which is getting to a point where it is going to impact interest rates, and it's going to impact our bond markets and really continue to add turmoil here. So it is the through line. You know, you dismantle public schools because you have no intention of sending your children there. You are just, and the whole game here is so disgusting and so wrong, and punishing the very people who are just trying to get by. And when you have 60% of American households aren't able to meet the basic needs, that's most households. And now we are turning around and making life harder and more expensive for them. That's a formula for disaster in this country. And we just have to keep pointing out there is one theme, and that is make the winner's circle very, very small and it only includes people who already have great wealth.
And I think my generation really feels that. There's been a lot of conversation, and I've certainly been a part of it, about how the Democratic Party approaches messaging to younger men. Of course, a lot of that is around housing and affordability. A line that stuck with me, that I heard out of a focus group, is that people feel like maybe the Democratic Party isn't thinking about young men or has abandoned young men. But what's worse is that the Republican Party lies to young men. They offer up, scapegoats and villains that do not actually tackle this issue of affordability. And it's what I see so often. I see it so often with, JD Vance as a figure who, talks down at you, waves your finger, wants to impose his lifestyle, but he doesn't actually live it. And that's the same thing with MAGA. They claim, they purport to care about younger people, then they saddle us with this debt. They make life more unaffordable. How do we make sure that we are showing people that we have an aspirational vision for what our country can be for younger people, outside of just the opposition that we have to be doing now? Of course, we are the opposition party. It's important, but people don't want to go back to 2 years ago, or they don't just want, us to return to what Medicaid and Medicare were. We want to see expansions of programs. We want to see expansion of affordability. How do we talk about that in a way that contrasts what Republicans are doing right now?
Yeah, and listen, we are in a high contrast environment, and we're doing a good job of that. But what we have to be really clear on is that Democrats in the House, we are going to fight for those gavels back, but we don't want those gavels to protect the status quo. Status quo isn't working. Like, making things worse is unbelievable, and we'll fight that tooth and nail. But we also are very clear that just going back and hopefully being able to put funding back in these is not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. And the status quo doesn't work. The system is rigged. And, I have 3 children, all in their 20s. They have a very different view than I did. Because when I was growing up, there was a sense that you could make it. If you worked hard, you played by the rules, that things could come together. And we've always had problems, and it looked very different depending on how much money your family had, your race and ethnicity. But in general, that American dream, there were still ways to get there, and there was an optimism. I don't see that. I don't see that same optimism for kids, because they're looking out. Younger people are looking out and saying, how am I going to be able to afford to go to college if that's what I want? How am I ever going to be able to afford the rent and save for a house someday if that's what I decide to do? Well, we're being, they're scratching their heads saying, why aren't more young women having children? Because they can't afford it. They can't afford it. So we've got to look at the ways that we are doing things and make them better. Make government work for people, and give people the tools so that they can have success. We've got to be serious about this housing crisis. We have to be serious about bringing down the cost of childcare, so that when people have kids and they need to go to work, it is not eating their entire budget through childcare. We've got to continue to insist that we don't stand by while they dismantle public education, but that we're smart about these things, and the way we can collect taxes by using improved technology, make those investments. We run government off of some very old legacy systems. There's so many ways we can improve efficiency and deliver more for taxpayers, and make sure that we have the funding to be able to give people these tools so that they can create a life and have that optimism that they can succeed. And frankly, when you have 60% of households not able to meet basic needs, how can we expect people to say this system works and I see myself in this government? So that is our goal, to address this affordability crisis, but also to be very systematic in ways that we improve in efficiency and looking for ways that we have to treat government like customer service and make it work for people. So, and change back this, that we put that emphasis on people who are working hard and people, young people who want to know that there is a future for them, and give them the tools so they can create their own success.
And I want to quickly end there on a point that you made about how we have to make government more efficient. I feel like this is a term that's obviously been so co-opted by the right recently. Someone on the left who's had success with this was Zohran Mamdani in New York, who did such a great job persuading through explanation of how government works and then how it can work, showing that we're not just bystanders, but we're political actors. I can't imagine anyone better to talk to about how we actually make government, especially in the House, work. What is going to be done by Democrats when we do retake the majority in the House that is going to be game changing, that is going to be shifting away from the status quo? What bit of hope can you give us to end on here?
Well, where do I begin? And I can tell you that it is really a broad range of ideas that goes from ways we can reform our criminal justice system to putting back the investment in the IRS so that we can collect that $70 billion out there that is owed from very wealthy people that we can't bring in, that creates a system that works against people, regular people who are trying to get by. So some of the things we have to do are look at ways that we can use technology, that we can improve efficiency. And we can't let DOGE, because that wasn't anything about efficiency. That is dismantling government. That is hurting people to reward elites. And and so we are going to look at ways we can look at permitting so we can create housing for people. We're going to look at ways that we can invest in our public schools, that we can create efficiencies in healthcare so we continue to bring the price down for people and make it something that is a right and not a privilege. There are so many good ideas about how we can do this, how we can create a green economy. And we have to be very specific about it and really push back on this notion that give us the gavels back, give us the majority back so that we can just restore, because we need to do more than that. Because the American people understand this system is rigged against us, and we have to not only be high contrast, but we have to show some hope and optimism. We see people, we're going to fight for you, and we're going to make government work for you.
Well, that gives me something to look forward to, and I appreciate you taking the time to deliver that optimistic message, Congresswoman, thank you so much.
Thank you.